The sound of rain pelting against the cafe windows was deafening, but it was nothing compared to the sudden crash of a coffee tray tipping over at the entrance. Lila Harper jumped instinctively, her wheelchair jolting slightly as the cups rolled across the floor. She spun toward the door, her heart racing. Standing there, dripping wet but impossibly composed, was a stranger with eyes that seemed to pierce through the chaos. "Excuse me," the man said, voice calm yet commanding, cutting through the din of the storm and the soft chatter of the few patrons inside. "I need to speak with you." Lila froze. Her hands tightened around the rims of her wheelchair. Something about his presence felt familiar yet unervingly significant. She had expected customers, morning regulars, perhaps even a delivery person, but not this. Not someone whose aura alone made the room feel smaller, as if every eye unconsciously shifted toward him. You're soaking wet," Lila managed, forcing her voice steady despite the rapid thumping of her pulse. "Do you want a towel or something?" The stranger shook his head gently, tilting his head with a faint smile. "No, thank you. I'm fine. It's not the rain I came for." Lila's brows furrowed. "Then what do you want?" His gaze softened slightly, but there was an intensity in his eyes that made her swallow. "I'm looking for someone," he said quietly. "And I believe I've found her." At that moment Lila's mind raced. Her past, her ex-boyfriend Liam, and the secret she had buried for years, all flashed in her mind. She instinctively felt that this man knew more than he should. Her heart pounded, a mix of fear, anticipation, and something else she couldn't quite place. I think you must be mistaken," she said cautiously, glancing around the cafe as if for backup. "I'm just running my cafe." The stranger stepped closer, careful not to startle her, but deliberate in closing the subtle distance. "No mistake," he said. "I need to understand something. And I believe you can help me." Lila blinked, unsure whether to feel alarmed or intrigued. His calm authority was disarming, and there was something about the way he observed her, respectful, attentive yet clearly assessing her, that made her pulse quicken. The few patrons in the cafe glanced over, curiosity piqued. Even Liam, who had been lurking near the back of the room to watch her work, stopped and stared, sensing an authority in the stranger that rendered him powerless. "You seem surprised," the stranger said, noticing her hesitation. "I assure you my intentions are not harmful. I only seek clarity. And perhaps, honesty." Lila exhaled slowly, realizing she was cornered by circumstance, yet strangely compelled to engage. Something about his presence demanded her attention, commanded her focus, and hinted that this encounter was not ordinary. It was pivotal. "Okay," she whispered finally, her voice soft but firm. "What is it that you want from me?" The stranger's faint smile widened, though subtly, as if acknowledging the tension and courage in her voice. "Only a conversation," he said. "And perhaps, the truth about something you've been keeping." Lila's eyes narrowed slightly. She had spent years hiding fragments of her life, memories, mistakes, secrets, fearing judgment or consequence. Yet the stranger's gaze did not carry judgment. Instead, it carried curiosity and something else. Respect. As he leaned casually against a nearby pillar, observing her, Lila realized that this chance encounter, so abrupt, so unexpected, could change everything. The storm outside mirrored the turmoil in her mind, but unlike the rain, the stranger's presence brought clarity instead of chaos. Unbeknownst to her, the man who had entered her cafe pretending to be just another customer was Ethan Gray, Billionaire CO, who had a very personal reason for being there. And what he would soon discover about Lila, the secret she had carefully concealed, would alter not only their lives, but the course of her cafe, her past relationships, and perhaps her heart. The air was thick with tension, curiosity, and the unspoken promise of revelation. Ella, or Lila, had no idea that this ordinary rainy morning in her cafe would be the beginning of a chain of events that would challenge her courage, test her heart, and reveal truths she had long feared to confront. The rain continued its steady rhythm against the cafe windows, though inside, The warmth and soft hum of the morning crowd created a stark contrast. Lila Harper sat behind the counter, her hands fidgeting slightly as she polished the espresso machine, still aware of the stranger at the table. His calm, composed posture suggested he was no ordinary visitor. And although she hadn't yet fully registered it, the way he observed her, as if measuring her reactions and every subtle movement, made her pulse race. "Are you all right?" the stranger asked, his voice cutting through the ambient noise of the cafe. The tone was polite, neutral, yet layered with an intensity that hinted at his awareness of more than she intended to reveal. Lila blinked, startled by the direct question. "Yes, I'm fine," she said cautiously, forcing a small smile. "Just a bit surprised, I guess." He nodded slightly, the faintest smirk appearing at the corner of his lips. "I would be too," he said softly. "It's not every day someone like you, someone who carries herself with such dignity despite everything, crosses my path." Her fingers tightened around the rim of the coffee cup she was holding. His words were unervingly precise, almost as if he knew more than a casual stranger should. She forced herself to breathe evenly, to remain composed. Thank you," she whispered, uncertain whether to feel flattered or cautious. The stranger leaned back slightly in his chair, observing her carefully. "You've been carrying a lot," he said quietly. "And yet you handle it with grace. That's rare." Lila's chest tightened. He didn't know about her past, the heartbreak, the ex-boyfriend Liam who had belittled her countless times, or the weight of her secret, a truth she had worked tirelessly to keep buried. And yet, somehow, his words struck her as genuine, without judgment, without condescension. I try my best," she murmured. "But people, they don't always see it that way." His eyes softened, the intensity behind them still present but tempered with warmth. "I see it," he said simply. "And it matters." At that moment, Liam appeared briefly in the doorway, his smirk failing to hide a spark of curiosity and irritation. He lingered in the background, clearly observing the interaction, but he did not approach. The stranger's calm, commanding presence made it clear without words that Liam's interference was unwelcome. Lila felt a subtle surge of relief. Even though she was alone in dealing with past humiliations, the stranger's quiet confidence created a protective space around her, a sense that someone competent and capable was watching over her, even if she didn't yet fully understand why. "You work hard," the stranger continued, tilting his head as if analyzing her every expression. "Not just here, not just in appearances, but in the way you navigate your life. It's admirable." Lila's pulse quickened at the sincerity in his voice. I don't know what to say," she admitted softly, feeling the weight of his attention. "You don't need to say anything," he replied gently. "I'm not here to demand explanations or stories. I only want to understand what drives you, what makes you, you." Her curiosity began to grow despite her caution. The stranger's presence, demeanor, and attentiveness were unlike anyone she had encountered. He didn't patronize her, he didn't pity her, and yet there was a subtle power in the way he observed her, a quiet authority that suggested influence and importance. For a moment they were silent, the cafe sounds fading into the background as a soft tension built between them. Lila felt a strange mixture of fear, anticipation, and fascination. Who was this man really? Why was he so interested, so precise in his words and his observations? He finally broke the silence. "There's more to this morning than coffee and conversation," he said, his tone measured. "But I need to be certain of one thing first. Can I trust you to be honest with me?" Lila froze slightly, the question cutting through her defenses. Honesty was something she valued, yet this man was a complete stranger. Yes, she said carefully, weighing each word. "I'll be honest." He smiled faintly, almost imperceptibly. "Good. That's all I need for now." The tension hung in the air, thick and palpable, as the stranger's subtle interest and careful observation signaled that this encounter was far from ordinary. Lila didn't yet know that the man in front of her, calm, composed, and impossibly observant, was Ethan Gray, the Billionaire CEO, who had orchestrated this meeting for reasons far beyond a casual conversation. And the secret she was guarding, the part of her life she had never revealed to anyone, was about to be uncovered. As she continued her work, the stranger sipped his coffee silently, eyes never leaving her. Lila felt a shift within herself, a realization that this encounter was more than coincidence. Something about him, the way he respected her space yet engaged her mind, suggested that her life, her cafe, and perhaps her heart were about to change in ways she had never imagined. The morning sun, now breaking through the clouds, illuminated the cafe in a golden glow, but the storm outside was still evident in the puddles and dripping eaves. It mirrored the tension and anticipation inside her, unseen, building, and ready to transform everything. Even Liam, now observing from a distance, felt powerless. The stranger's authority, presence, and quiet composure had shifted the dynamic completely. What began as a simple cafe visit had evolved into a pivotal moment, one that would test courage, reveal secrets, and start a bond that neither Lila nor the mysterious stranger would forget. The morning crowd had thinned, leaving the cafe quieter than before. The rain outside had slowed to a light drizzle, streaking the glass windows with silver threads. Lila Harper's hands were steady as she wiped down the counter, but her mind raced. The stranger sitting across from her, calm, composed, and quietly observing every move, had left her unsettled and intrigued. He hadn't revealed much about himself, only hints, carefully chosen words that made her both cautious and curious. There was an air of authority about him that demanded attention, yet he never imposed. Every gesture, every glance was deliberate, subtle, and unerringly perceptive. Lila glanced at him, trying to gauge his intentions. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice low but steady. "Why not just leave it at a coffee?" He smiled faintly, almost as if he expected the question. "Because some things are more important than coffee, Lila. And some encounters are meant to be more than they appear." Her pulse quickened. How did he know her name? She hadn't mentioned it aloud. Her ex, Liam, was nowhere in sight, and yet this stranger seemed intimately aware of her presence, her subtle reactions, and the tension that clung to her shoulders. "You know who I am, don't you?" she asked cautiously, testing the waters, though part of her feared the answer. He leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. "I know enough to know that you've been carrying something heavy. Something you haven't shared." Lila's hands gripped the counter tighter. The secret she had guarded so fiercely, the truth about her company, the financial struggle, and the personal risk, felt suddenly exposed. "I don't know what you mean," she whispered, trying to maintain composure. He studied her closely, his eyes unwavering. "I know that your cafe, your work, and your heart are more intertwined than most people realize. And I know that what you're hiding could change everything, if revealed at the wrong time." A shiver ran down her spine. How could he know? She had been careful, painfully careful, to ensure that no one could trace the truth back to her. And yet here he was, a stranger, understanding more than she had let anyone see. I don't know what you're talking about," she said again, her voice firmer this time, though doubt lingered. He let a pause hang, letting the silence speak. Then he leaned back, a faint, enigmatic smile on his lips. "You're remarkably brave, Lila. I respect that. Most people would have faltered long before now. But you face it head-on." Her mind raced. Brave. Respect. Why did his words feel so personal, so precise? She realized she was drawn to the calm authority he carried, the way he observed without judgment, and yet held her accountable, subtly and effortlessly. The cafe door chimed again, and she instinctively turned, her heart skipping. A courier delivered a small envelope to the counter. Lila picked it up, noting the elegant handwriting. No return address. She opened it carefully, revealing a contract. Her cafe, her company's ownership, a potential acquisition offer she had never anticipated. Her hands trembled slightly as she realized the implication. And then she looked up at the stranger. His gaze was fixed on her, calm, controlled, yet filled with an intensity she could not ignore. "I think it's time you know," he said quietly. "I am not just a passerby in your cafe. I am involved in something much larger. Something that concerns you, your cafe, and your future." Lila's eyes widened. What do you mean?" He leaned forward, his tone deliberate, almost cinematic in its clarity. "I am Ethan Gray, CEO of Gray Enterprises. And I am here because I intend to invest in or acquire your company. But before we discuss terms, I needed to see the person behind the work. I needed to see you in person without pretense." The revelation hit her like a bolt of lightning. The stranger who had asked her to dance, who had observed her so carefully, who had created this tension and curiosity. He was the billionaire CEO. The very person capable of changing her life, her business, and the trajectory of her cafe. Her mind spun with disbelief, excitement, and cautious hope. Everything about his behavior, the respect, the subtle authority, the unwavering calm, suddenly made sense. She realized that the encounter had been orchestrated, deliberate, and that her careful actions and dignity had not gone unnoticed. Liam's mocking smirk from the previous day, the whispered judgments, all paled in comparison to the gravity of this moment. The ex was irrelevant. This was someone powerful, someone genuine, and someone who recognized her courage and integrity. Ethan studied her reaction, noting the mixture of shock, curiosity, and cautious optimism. "I've observed more than you realize," he said softly. "And what I see is someone worth trusting, respecting, and investing in. Not just the cafe but the person who makes it what it is." For the first time, Lila felt the weight of possibility press against her chest. Not fear, not doubt, but a fragile sense of hope. She was being seen, understood, and valued in a way she had never experienced before. As Ethan extended a hand, this time not as a casual stranger, but as a man revealing his true authority and intent, Lila hesitated only briefly before taking it. A subtle tension lingered, the weight of the revelation, the potential future, and the slow-burn connection forming between them. In that single moment, the cafe, the rain outside, and the quiet hum of the city felt suspended. Lila understood that this encounter was more than coincidence. It was the first step in a story that would test courage, reveal truths, and perhaps change her life entirely. The ex-boyfriend Liam could do nothing here. The whispers of judgment, the shadows of the past, all dissolved in the presence of a man who saw her strength, her dignity, and the hidden fire that even she had sometimes doubted. The game had changed, and Lila was ready to face it. Guided, observed, and slowly understood by someone who had the power to impact her life in ways she could not yet imagine. The afternoon sun had begun to fade, casting soft golden streaks through the cafe windows. The once bustling space was quieter now, the hum of conversation reduced to the occasional murmur of patrons lingering over their late coffees. Lila Harper moved with practiced grace in her wheelchair, wiping down the counters, arranging pastries, and occasionally glancing toward the table where Ethan Gray sat, a stranger who had quickly transformed into a presence both commanding and surprisingly comforting. Since the morning encounter, Lila had found herself replaying every word, every glance, every subtle gesture. There was something about him, something she couldn't quite define, that made her heart race and her mind sharpen simultaneously. Unlike anyone she had ever met, Ethan observed her with keen attention without ever patronizing, without ever overstepping, a balance so delicate it both unnerved and intrigued her. "I don't mean to intrude," Ethan said, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled over the cafe. "But I wanted to understand more about the person who built this place, who maintains it with such care, and yet carries so much grace under scrutiny." His voice was calm, deliberate, almost soothing, but it carried the weight of genuine curiosity. Lila hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. You already know a lot," she said softly. "I don't usually share. Not with strangers." Her fingers drummed lightly on the tabletop, betraying the nervous energy she usually kept hidden. Ethan leaned back slightly, giving her the space she needed while keeping his eyes on her, conveying both respect and interest. "I'm not just any stranger," he admitted carefully. And I think it's important that you know. My interest is sincere, both in your work and in you. I have no intention of judging, only of understanding. Lila felt her chest tighten, the weight of the morning's revelations mingling with the unexpected warmth in his voice. She realized that despite the control she had always tried to maintain, there was a subtle ease she felt in his presence, a strange blend of security and intrigue. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, curiosity overriding caution. "Why invest this much attention in me, in my cafe?" Ethan's gaze softened. "Because I see potential," he said quietly, "not just in the business but in you. Courage, resilience, dignity. Qualities that are rare and worth recognizing. And sometimes, understanding the person behind the work changes everything." The words struck Lila with a curious force. For years she had managed her cafe, her life, and her secrets alone, navigating judgment, expectation, and subtle humiliation from those who didn't believe in her. And now, here was a man, a stranger, acknowledging her efforts, her struggles, and her integrity. She felt a mixture of validation, relief, and something else. A flicker of trust. The cafe door chimed, and for a fleeting moment, her pulse jumped. A delivery man entered, breaking the momentary cocoon of intimacy, but Ethan remained composed, letting the interruption pass without flinching. His steady calm reminded her that this wasn't about grand gestures. It was about patience, observation, and measured engagement. "You've faced challenges I can't even imagine," he continued, his voice soft, intentional. "And yet you've maintained grace. That doesn't go unnoticed. Most people would crumble under the scrutiny. But you rise above it." Lila's fingers tightened unconsciously on the wheelchair armrests. She hadn't expected recognition, not like this. "I've had to," she admitted quietly. "I've always had to fight for respect. For understanding. People assume things about me that aren't true." Ethan nodded slowly. "I see it. And I respect it. More than that, I admire it. And I want to ensure that whatever decisions are made, about your cafe, your work, your future, are done with recognition of your vision and your efforts." Her mind raced. This was no ordinary stranger, no casual investor or passerby. His words carried weight. His presence carried authority, and yet he was careful not to overshadow her, not to dominate or intimidate. He acknowledged her, valued her, and engaged her as an equal. The soft hum of the remaining patrons faded into background noise. Time seemed to suspend itself as Lila realized she had allowed herself to relax slightly, to open her mind to the possibility of trust. Slowly, cautiously, a bond was forming, not merely professional but deeply human. Ethan shifted slightly, leaning forward. His gaze focused but gentle. "I don't expect immediate answers," he said quietly. "But I hope that, in time, you will see I am someone you can rely on. Not just for your cafe, but for your peace of mind, for your trust." Lila looked at him, her eyes reflecting a mixture of astonishment, gratitude, and something deeper she had not felt in years. She recognized that this encounter, so sudden, so unexpected, was pivotal. Not just for her business, not just for the present moment, but for the trajectory of her life. I appreciate that," she whispered, a small, genuine smile forming on her lips. "It's rare to find someone who understands without judgment." Ethan's faint smile mirrored hers, subtle but meaningful. "Understanding is the first step," he said. "And I hope to offer more than that in the days to come." The rain outside had tapered off, leaving the streets wet and gleaming in the afternoon light. The quiet intimacy of the cafe, the golden reflections on the polished floors, and the soft shadows of the late morning created a cinematic backdrop for what was no longer just a casual encounter. It was the start of something significant, a bond grounded in respect, admiration, and the slow stirrings of trust that could evolve into something deeper. For the first time, Lila allowed herself to imagine that she wasn't alone, that her courage, her dedication, and her dignity could be recognized, respected, and even cherished. And as she glanced once more at Ethan, She realized that the man who had pretended to be a stranger was not only observing her. He was seeing her. Truly seeing her. And that perception, rare and profound, could change everything. The cafe, the rain-soaked streets, the fading hum of the city. They all became the backdrop for a story of trust, subtle admiration, and a slow-burning connection that neither of them had expected, yet both were already invested in shaping. The afternoon had melted into early evening, and the cafe was nearly empty now. The golden light of the setting sun filtered through the rain-speckled windows, painting the polished floors and the scattered tables in soft, cinematic hues. Lila Harper sat behind the counter, her hands resting calmly on the polished surface, yet her mind raced with anticipation and uncertainty. Ethan Gray had asked her to meet him after the gala in private, a proposition that had initially made her cautious. But something in the way he had observed her earlier, the respect, the subtle admiration, the patience, had planted a seed of trust she couldn't ignore. Tonight, she would finally know the full reason he had appeared in her cafe, posing as a stranger, and why he had seemed to know so much about her life without ever prying. The door chimed softly, and Lila's heart skipped a beat. There he was, standing in the doorway, impeccably dressed yet casual enough to appear unassuming. He carried no entourage, no show of wealth or status, just his composed presence, calm, deliberate, and impossibly commanding. "Lila," he said, his voice low, steady, and infused with the same warmth she had felt earlier. "Thank you for agreeing to meet me." She nodded, her pulse quickening despite her attempt at composure. I needed to know the truth," she admitted. "Why you came, why you pretended to be a stranger, and why you seem to know so much about me." Ethan smiled faintly, a mixture of humility and confidence in his expression. "Because I wanted to understand the person behind the story, the woman whose courage, dignity, and resilience I observed. And because I needed to see if the person I wanted to involve in this venture, your cafe, your future, was worthy of trust." Her breath caught. You mean my cafe?" "Yes," he said simply. "Your company, your vision, your hard work. I've been planning an investment, but not blindly. I wanted to meet you first to see how you handle pressure, judgment, and life itself. And now I see clearly, you're remarkable." Lila's chest swelled with a mix of disbelief, relief, and a faint thrill. The stranger, no, the man, had entered her life under the guise of anonymity, only to reveal that he was Ethan Gray, Billionaire CEO, and that he had been evaluating not just the business, but her character, her integrity, and her heart. "You've seen me at my best and worst," Lila said softly. "And you still trust me." Ethan stepped closer, his gaze unwavering. "I don't just trust you. I respect you, your work, and the person you are. And I want to be part of the path you've been building. For the cafe, for your dreams, and for you." The words hung in the air, charged with meaning. Lila's eyes glistened as she realized the depth of what he was offering. Not charity, not pity, but genuine recognition, partnership, and unspoken but undeniable, a connection that could grow into something more. She thought of Liam, her ex, whose arrogance and mockery had seemed insurmountable, and now felt a distant memory, powerless against the authenticity of Ethan's presence. The humiliation, the judgment, the doubts, they all dissolved in the warmth and sincerity of a man who saw her as she truly was. I don't know what to say," she whispered, a smile touching her lips. "You don't need to say anything yet," Ethan replied. "Actions will speak louder. But tonight, I want you to know that your courage, your work, and your dignity have not gone unnoticed. And if you allow me, I'd like to ensure they are honored, valued, and protected." Lila felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, not from sadness, but from a profound sense of recognition and validation. She realized that the encounter, which had begun with a simple act of pretending and subtle observation, had grown into an opportunity she had never imagined. Ethan reached out, offering a gentle hand, not as a stranger, not as a boss, but as a partner. "Trust is earned," he said quietly. "And you've earned mine. Let's shape the future together." Her fingers trembled slightly as she accepted his hand, and in that simple touch, 1,000 unspoken words were shared. respect, admiration, understanding, and the slow blooming spark of something deeper. Over the next hours, they discussed the acquisition, the future of her cafe, and her vision for growth. Ethan listened intently, incorporating her ideas into his plans, valuing her insight and expertise. Every suggestion, every concern she voiced, was met with consideration, showing her not just his business acumen but his respect for her agency and judgment. By the time the meeting concluded, the cafe had emptied, and the golden glow of sunset bathed the room in a soft warmth. Lila realized that her life had shifted irrevocably. The man who had entered as a stranger had revealed himself as a CEO, a mentor, and perhaps the first person in years who saw her not for her limitations, but for her courage, intelligence, and heart. As they prepared to leave, Ethan looked at her, eyes steady and sincere. "Tonight was just the beginning," he said. "But I promise whatever challenges come next, I will be by your side. And you won't face them alone." Lila's heart swelled with a mixture of gratitude, admiration, and cautious hope. She realized that the future, once uncertain, shadowed by doubt and the lingering presence of past failures, now held a promise of partnership, respect, and perhaps love. The rain outside had ceased, leaving the streets glistening under the fading sunlight. Inside, the quiet hum of the cafe echoed the unspoken resolution between them. Lila Harper, once weighed down by judgment and secrecy, now felt seen, valued, and empowered. And Ethan Gray, the CEO who had walked in as a stranger, had become a catalyst for change. Professional, emotional, and deeply personal. As they stepped into the evening light together, there was no need for words. The city, the cafe, and the subtle stirrings of trust and connection were all the confirmation they needed. A story that began with a casual encounter and a hidden identity had blossomed into a narrative of courage, respect, and slow-burning romance. A cinematic ending that promised growth, partnership, and the thrill of possibilities yet to come.